What if the most honest war films ever made were never meant to impress you at all? No slow-motion glory, no heroic speeches, just fear, mistakes, and exhaustion. These 12 British war movies were so accurate they scared audiences, and Hollywood quietly looked the other way. You probably were never supposed to find them. Ready to argue about it. Number 12. In Which We Serve, 1942. This is not a war movie that wants your applause. It wants your attention. From the opening moments, In Which We Serve makes a quiet promise it never breaks. This story will not flatter you. It will not soften the cost. It will show you war as a slow, grinding erosion of ordinary lives. Bond-inspired directly by real naval experience, the film follows a destroyer crew not as symbols but as people who eat, argue, remember home, and quietly accept danger as routine. There are no heroic speeches timed for music cues. Orders are given flatly. Loss arrives without warning. Survival feels accidental rather than earned. What shocked early audiences was how emotionally intimate it felt. Sailors are shown clinging to memories while clinging to wreckage. The sea is not an enemy to be conquered, but a force that simply does not care. That indifference is terrifying. British critics praised its honesty and discipline. Overseas reception was more hesitant. Hollywood distributors struggled because the film offered no traditional victory arc, no final charge, no clear win, just endurance. Its influence inside Britain was enormous, shaping decades of restrained war storytelling. Outside Britain, it was quietly sidelined for being too sober. Number 11. The Sea Shall Not Have Them, 1954. Most war films chase explosions. This one chases bodies before the sea claims them. The Sea Shall Not Have Them focuses on RAF, Air Sea Rescue crews whose entire job was arriving seconds before hope ran out. What makes the film extraordinary is its patience. Long stretches are spent scanning empty water, listening to engines strain, watching men fight exhaustion while knowing they may already be too late. The tension does not come from combat. It comes from waiting. Audiences were struck by how unglamorous rescue is portrayed. Survivors are not celebrating. They are numb, shaking, barely able to speak. The rescuers themselves carry quiet emotional damage from what they cannot save. British critics admired its procedural realism and emotional restraint. American distributors were uncertain how to sell a war film without a villain or a triumphant finale. As a result, it faded internationally, despite strong domestic respect. Military historians still point to its accuracy in depicting rescue fatigue and operational pressure. It understands something many films miss. Saving lives repeatedly leaves marks of its own. Hollywood rarely looks twice at that truth. Number 10. Went the Day Well? 1942. This film terrifies without raising its voice. Went the Day Well begins in a picture postcard English village where nothing seems wrong until everything is. Enemy soldiers arrive disguised as allies, and the horror unfolds not through spectacle, but through delay. The brilliance lies in how normal it all feels at first. Polite conversations, small routines, trust given automatically. When violence finally erupts, it does so suddenly and without cinematic warning. That shock was deliberate. The filmmakers wanted audiences to understand how fragile safety really is. British viewers were deeply unsettled because the story felt plausible. Civilians hesitate. Some make the wrong choices. Courage is uneven, and fear is contagious. There is no fantasy of instant unity. Critics praised its nerve and tension. Some officials worried it went too far. Hollywood largely ignored it because it challenged comforting ideas about the home front being safe or morally simple. Today, the film feels eerily modern. It is not about invasion armies. It is about infiltration, trust, and the cost of assuming danger always announces itself. That message still lands like a punch. Number 9. The Long and the Short and the Tall, 1961. This film does not explode. It tightens. The Long and the Short and the Tall locks you inside a British patrol during the Malayan emergency and then slowly turns the pressure until something snaps. There is no battlefield spectacle. The jungle itself becomes the weapon. From the first scene, the men feel lost both physically and mentally. Orders are vague. The enemy is invisible. Heat, exhaustion, fear, and mistrust begin doing more damage than bullets ever could. Every step forward feels like a mistake waiting to happen. What makes the film remarkable is how quickly authority erodes. Rank stops mattering when survival becomes uncertain. Soldiers argue, resentments surface. Decisions are questioned openly. The war stops being about objectives and becomes about endurance and fear control. Audiences at the time were unsettled because the film refused to frame the conflict as noble or clean. There are no speeches about duty. There is no comforting sense of purpose. Just men trying not to lose control in an environment that strips away certainty. Critics praised its psychological realism, while others accused it of undermining morale. That accusation alone explains why Hollywood never embraced it. There is nothing triumphant here, no heroic ending to export. Number 8. The Hill, 1965. This is a war film where the enemy wears the same uniform. The Hill takes place inside a British military prison and turns discipline into the battlefield. There are no front lines, no gunfire, just power punishment and psychological domination. The story follows soldiers sentenced for various offenses and subjected to brutal physical routines under a system designed to break resistance. The hill itself, a mound of scorching sand, becomes a symbol of pointless suffering enforced in the name of order. What shocked audiences was how openly the film questioned authority. Officers are not portrayed as mentors or leaders, but as men hiding cruelty behind regulation. Punishment is routine. Compassion is treated as weakness. Critics praised its performances and moral courage. Some officials were deeply uncomfortable with how accurately it depicted institutional abuse. It was seen as dangerously honest. That honesty kept it from wide international promotion. Hollywood avoided it because it stripped military power of myth. There is no redemption arc, no reforming speech, just the grinding reality of a system that values obedience over humanity. The Hill remains disturbing because it understands that war damage does not only come from combat, it comes from structures that dehumanize in the name of discipline. Number 7. Play Dirty, 1969. If you are looking for heroics, this film actively resents you for it. Play Dirty is one of the most cynical war movies ever produced, and it never pretends otherwise. From the opening moments, it makes clear that expendability is the real strategy. Set around a dangerous sabotage mission, the story follows a group of soldiers manipulated by higher command into an operation designed to fail. Orders are deliberately misleading. Sacrifice is planned, not accidental. What makes the film infamous is how openly it exposes betrayal. Men are sent to die to protect reputations. Missions are altered mid-execution for political convenience. Loyalty is a one-way street. Audiences were divided. Some admired its boldness. Others were angered by its refusal to honor sacrifice in traditional ways. Critics recognized its moral ambition even as they debated its bitterness. Hollywood largely ignored it because it dismantled too many comforting illusions. There is no victory that feels earned. The ending lands like a moral accusation rather than a conclusion. Play Dirty has aged brutally well. And in an era of whistleblowers and institutional distrust, its message feels prophetic. War is not always mismanaged by accident. Sometimes it is managed exactly as intended. Number 6. Overlord, 1975. Overlord does not feel like a movie that was staged. It feels like a memory that somehow learned how to move. From the opening frames, the film blends real wartime footage with fiction so seamlessly that the line between documentation and drama disappears. You are not watching a hero's journey. You are following a single ordinary British soldier drifting toward a fate he does not yet understand. The film spends most of its runtime refusing spectacle. Training is monotonous. Conversations are awkward. Fear is quiet. By the time the D-Day landing approaches, the audience already feels exhausted and emotionally worn down. When violence finally arrives, it does not explode into glory. It arrives suddenly, brutally, and without ceremony. Critics praised Overlord for its technical daring and emotional restraint. Audiences were divided because it offered no rousing payoff. Hollywood largely ignored it because it lacked star speeches and a traditional arc. Yet historians and filmmakers quietly admired it for doing something rare. It made the journey to war feel heavier than the battle itself. What makes Overlord linger is its inevitability. You know where the story is going long before it gets there. The tension comes from watching a life continue anyway. Number 5. The War Game, 1966. This film was considered too dangerous to show. That alone tells you everything. The War Game presents a nuclear strike on Britain not as spectacle, but as administrative collapse. Sirens do not save anyone. Emergency plans fail immediately. Authority disintegrates under pressure. What makes the film horrifying is its method. It uses documentary techniques, interviews, simulations, and official language to portray mass destruction as a logistical nightmare. Casualties are described clinically. Decisions are made too late. Viewers are forced to sit with consequences rather than explosions. When completed, the film was withheld from broadcast for years because it was deemed too disturbing for the public. Critics praised its realism. Officials feared its impact. Hollywood had no interest in a story that framed modern warfare as meaningless bureaucratic disaster rather than power projection. Decades later, the film remains chilling because nothing in it feels outdated. The calm tone makes the devastation worse. There is no comfort, no recovery, and no heroism. Just systems collapsing faster than anyone can react. The War Game did something few films dare. It stripped war of narrative. What remains is panic, confusion, and silence. That truth was too stark for mass entertainment. Number 4, Battle of Britain, 1969. This film should have been a global classic. Instead, it became a quiet casualty of its own accuracy. Battle of Britain is unmatched in its technical realism, using real aircraft, real formations, and authentic tactics to recreate the air war over England. Unlike most aerial films, it refuses to mythologize pilots as superhuman. They are young, tired, and increasingly hollowed out by repetition. Dogfights are terrifying, not elegant. Losses accumulate without pause. There is no sense of individual destiny, just relentless pressure. Critics admired its scale and commitment to realism. Audiences respected it, but did not embrace it emotionally. Hollywood preferred later films that focused on individual heroes rather than collective strain. What makes Battle of Britain remarkable is its refusal to exaggerate. It does not inflate enemy numbers. It does not simplify strategy. It treats the conflict as a grinding test of endurance rather than a romantic duel. Modern historians still cite it as one of the most accurate aerial war films ever made. Its legacy lives quietly among professionals rather than fans. It chose truth over legend and paid the price in popularity. But in doing so, it preserved history without distortion. Or number 3, The Cruel Sea, 1953. This film does something most war movies avoid. It forces you to live with decisions after they are made. The Cruel Sea follows Royal Navy officers fighting the Battle of the Atlantic, where victory often meant choosing which lives could be saved and which had to be left behind. The ocean is vast, unforgiving, and emotionally merciless. What makes the film devastating is how calmly it presents impossible choices. Survivors are sometimes abandoned because stopping would risk the entire ship. Orders are obeyed not because they are right, but because hesitation means death for everyone. The film never lets you forget the faces attached to those choices. British audiences recognized the truth immediately. Many had lived it or lost someone to it. Critics praised the film's moral seriousness and emotional restraint. Hollywood took note of its craftsmanship but avoided its message. There is no triumph here, only responsibility and guilt carried forward. The Cruel Sea remains one of the most psychologically honest naval films ever made. It understands that command is not about courage alone. It is about living with what cannot be undone. That quiet devastation is why it still feels heavier than far louder war epics. Number 2, Ice Cold in Alex, 1958. This war film is powered by exhaustion rather than explosions. Ice Cold in Alex drops you into the North African campaign and then strips away every illusion about desert warfare. There are no sweeping charges or heroic formations, but just an ambulance crawling through endless heat carrying wounded men who may not survive the journey. From the very start, survival feels uncertain and fragile. What gives the film its lasting power is how physically convincing it is. Sweat pours constantly. Faces crack under sun and strain. Every movement feels labored. The desert is not scenery, but an enemy that never stops pressing in. The film understands that the environment can be just as deadly as opposing forces. Even brief moments of hope are overshadowed by dehydration and fatigue. You feel the thirst long before the characters mention it. Audiences at the time were stunned by its restraint. Critics praised its realism and character focus, noting how tension was built through attrition rather than action. Hollywood largely ignored it because it offered no obvious spectacle. Its most famous moment is not a battle, but a drink shared at the end after unbearable hardship. That scene works because it feels earned through suffering rather than scripted triumph. Number 1. A Night to Remember, 1958. This film remains devastating because it refuses to perform. A Night to Remember reconstructs the Titanic disaster with clinical precision and emotional restraint. There is no swelling score guiding your feelings, no invented romance to soften the blow. The tragedy unfolds through procedure hierarchy and delay, which makes it far more unsettling than spectacle ever could. What separates it from later interpretations is its discipline. Officers act according to protocol even when that protocol is failing. Passengers respond based on what they know, not what the audience knows. Confusion spreads slowly. Panic emerges unevenly. The film understands that disasters are not instant chaos, but gradual breakdowns of communication and authority. Critics praised the film for its obsessive research and respect for real events. Survivors recognized behaviors, situations, and decisions depicted on screen. Hollywood would later revisit the story with massive budgets and emotional amplification, but many historians still argue this version remains closer to the truth. It does not ask you to cry, it asks you to observe. These films chose truth over applause and were quietly sidelined for it. Now it is your turn. Which one deserves more recognition, and which do you think modern audiences would reject outright? Be honest. Has Hollywood trained us to need spectacle instead of accuracy? Drop your takes in the comments and be ready to argue.